Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday. It's October the 8th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream. As usual, you as a viewer, as a participant in our live stream, has a priority to suggest topics of your interest to be discussed live. If I don't have any topics over here, then I'm going to go to my backlog and discuss other topics. So don't be shy, get started. And I can see we have a Christy. Hi, Christy. Welcome to the live stream. Christy has a question for us. Let's take a look. Once the application process for the retirement residency visa starts, how long before one can go to visit a neighboring country, say Uruguay? Chrissy, so just to clarify, there are two different tracks for you to apply for the retirement a route in Brazil. One is going to be through the consulate. When you apply through the consulate, everything is done right at the consulate. You actually get a visa on your passport, and then you enter Brazil. Once you enter Brazil, you have 90 days to register with the Brazilian Federal Police. And my recommendation is if you get in the visa, the actual visa at the consulate, that you do not travel outside of Brazil before registering with the Brazilian Federal Police, right? Because that's like an expected obligation that you have, like you need to discharge, you need to register. So I would say, get the appointment with the Brazilian Federal Police for as soon as possible after you arrive in the country. Okay, now many of our clients, they are not going to apply through the consulate, particularly because of the health insurance requirement for retirees. If they are buying health insurance just for the sake of applying through a consulate, they could easily spend a few $1,000s just on this requirement alone, right? So many of our clients, they say, you know what, I want to apply in Brazil. When you apply in Brazil, you don't need to buy this expensive health insurance, right? You can basically get the Brazil retirement residency, right? That's the distinction. When you apply abroad, you get a visa. When you apply while in Brazil, you get the residency. And once you get the residency, guess what? You have access to free universal healthcare in Brazil. Typically overwhelmed, right? Many people, they're still going to choose a private healthcare, but nonetheless, if you get the retirement residency, you're going to have access to the free healthcare. And if you wish to buy health insurance, yes, you can do it, and then it's going to be cheaper than when you buy from abroad, right? When you buy from abroad, you don't have the resident card yet, and therefore you're going to pay expensive amounts. If you wait until you have the resident card, then you're going to buy the same health insurance that I, as a Brazilian, can buy, okay? Now, answering your question, right? So if you get in the visa from abroad, my recommendation, arrive in Brazil, do your registration at the Brazilian Federal Police. Once you attend the appointment in which you're going to get biometrics done, like you're free to travel, no worries. Just make sure you come back to pick up the card later, right? Because the card is not delivered on the same day of the registration. Usually takes a couple of months to become available, okay? Now, if you are applying in Brazil, let's say as long as you have enough days in your allowed stay, in your immigration year, you're free to travel as often as you want. You can go to Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, any country, or even go back to the US and return to Brazil. No worries. After we file your petition, right, your application for the retirement residency, then it gets even better because from a legal perspective, we stop the clock, meaning that even if you are kind of running out of days of stay in Brazil, the application is going to provide you, a legal reason for staying in the country. Like, you know what, I'm going to stay here until I have the result of my application. Okay, so typically this is not going to be a problem Christy, and our our analysts, they are going to typically work with you in terms of dates, just to make sure that, for instance, like if we are scheduling a visit to the Brazilian Federal Police, we're going to schedule naturally for a date in which you're going to be around. Okay? Matt Gaines, good to see you, Matt. All right. Oi, Dr. Oliveira. We spoke about home heating in the South. Camila sent us some homes with in-floor water heating. I have heard that the system is efficient and comfortable. Any experience and thoughts? Yes, that's one of the new technologies. That's good stuff, Matt. That's good stuff. It's typically efficient, right? Like the one you want to avoid is usually electrical heating, right? Electrical heating may get very expensive. But in-floor water heating, I would assume they are using a gas. Okay, very common in Brazil for gas to be used to heat water. Both like in Rio Grande do Sul, right in the south, like Rio Grande do Sul, Santa Catarina, and very interesting, not so common in São Paulo, right? And that's a sequence of states, right? So we're talking about Rio Grande do Sul, then Santa Catarina, then there is São Paulo. Not so common in São Paulo, but then after you kind of skip São Paulo, it becomes common again in Rio de Janeiro, right? And I always ask myself, why are people in Rio de Janeiro so attached to the heated water? And I think it is because of the massive presence of British people in the past. And they kind of brought like this kind of culture of heating water, right? Like, particularly in Europe, it's very common for you to see, like those kind of exposed boilers. And they're super common in Rio de Janeiro, right? Like in Copacabana, Ipanema, you always see those boilers. They are also common in Rio Grande do Sul as well. And that's probably what they are using to heat the the residences, and it should feel really nice, right? Like, because I'm just thinking, like, you're gonna be walking, like bare feet, and you're gonna be like in the peak of the winter cold, you're gonna be feeling very comfy at home. That's so interesting, Matt. All right, Virgilio, good morning. Good morning, doctor. How are you doing, Virgilio? Good to see you over here. All right, let's take a look at the news. Let's see what's going on. Let's take a look at Estadão. Estadão is a traditional newspaper in Brazil. And here news is about methanol. Methanol, it's a variety of alcohol. Many of you may know that in Brazil, in addition to gasoline and diesel, we also have like a variety of alcohol, as fuel for our cars, right? And methanol is not the same type of alcohol that you would have like in a drink, and but it looks like very similar, right? Like it looks, a kind of smell, just like alcohol. And believe it or not, like there was a kind of criminal organization, or there is a criminal organization in Brazil using methanol, like for kind of like make drinks and get a cheaper variety of alcohol to use in drinks and alcoholic drinks in general, right? And but the problem is methanol is toxic, so a lot of people are going sick. Some people went blind, and believe it or not, some people even died because of that. So there is a whole commotion going on in Brazil. Like you're gonna watch and hear about this methanol thing pretty much every day, in every single news, channel. If you're watching TV, if you're reading a newspaper, right, you're gonna see this subject over and over, and very scary, right? Like, how can you go out for a drink if you don't know if that particular drink is going to be poisoned by methanol or not, right? Like, I mean, of course, I get very sad, right? Like, it doesn't look good for our country at all, right? That's not good. But it is what it is now. Like, police force, they're investigating, and they're saying that they are apprehending part of this criminal ring, in charge of falsifying and adding methanol to drinks. All right, so that's the main news here. We see here, President Lula along Governor Tarcísio. Lula is the current Brazilian president. Tarcísio is the current São Paulo governor. Tarcísio is still making up his mind if he's going to, be a candidate in the next election. There is a lot of celebration by, the left in Brazil because President Bolsonaro will no longer participate in the election. Right now, he's like trying to, he's running for his life. Right, like, I mean, there was a whole, a trial by the Supreme Court, and I mean, he's just unable to participate in anything, even because as part of the prosecution they have this prohibition for him to participate in the election, right? So the left and there is another newspaper, Folha de São Paulo, right? This one is Estado de São Paulo. The other one is Folha de São Paulo. These are, not surprisingly, the two largest newspapers in Brazil. The other one, and it's a kind of, surprising because they're celebrating like there is no real challenge to President Lula in the next election, right? Like, so they're kind of saying, all right, mission accomplished, right? Like, we got rid of President Bolsonaro, right? And I thought, maybe they could, just like, be less conspicuous about the outcome, right? Like, I mean, there are things for sure that were very damaging to President Bolsonaro, but, like for a candidate, to be excluded from the, from the election, and the other side celebrating that there is no one else to challenge their candidate. I mean, it doesn't sound good, to my opinion. All right. Okay, so that's it for the news. Let's take a look at the ad for Remax Nomad States, our partner real estate agency. All right, they work throughout Brazil, not only Rio de Janeiro, even though they are based in Leblon, Rio de Janeiro, right? Leblon is probably the most traditional area in the south of Rio de Janeiro, okay? And you can contact them. They can get you, a short list of properties. They can help you with your, search. Remax, as you probably know, is pretty huge. It's the largest real estate organization in the world, right? Like, and it is from the United States, and you find Remax nowadays very commonly in Brazil, just like you find it everywhere else, right? In Europe, in the Arab Emirates, like, they have a system, and in my opinion, the system, it does help with, trying to reduce your risks when buying a real estate property, particularly in Brazil. Like, in Brazil, there are so many things that are different from the process of buying real estate in other places, such as in the United States, right? Like, in the United States, you have like title insurance, meaning that if you buy a property from John, but Andrew was actually the owner, guess what? The title agency, they are going to refund your money. So there is little to no risk when buying real estate, at least from the title perspective, right? Not in Brazil. In Brazil, if you buy a property and the seller, has ongoing litigation, if the seller has, obligations, just to give you an example that's very typical in Brazil, if the seller had a housekeeper and the housekeeper was asking, for benefits, and the seller didn't pay the housekeeper would file a labor claim against the seller, and labor claims based on law, they are superior to the rights of a buyer of real estate in Brazil, right? Believe it or not. So, if there is a maid who worked, I don't know, for 10 years, and she has a huge claim against the seller, you buy the property, even though the seller could be the real owner of the property, the housekeeper would have a claim on that property superior to your right as a buyer, right? So that's pretty concerning. The second most, relevant distinction is that in Brazil, escrow accounts, they are not common, okay? Nowadays, there are some efforts to, make escrows more common. There is an attempt by the registries, by the so-called cartórios, right? Some people, they call it notary publics, not exactly notary public. I think registries and cartórios, they are a better explanation. But, typically, sellers are not going to want to deal with an escrow, right? Unless you're buying a property that has been in the market forever, or if you are overpaying the property. If you are in a competitive market, I guarantee seller is not going to put up with an escrow, okay? So these are some of the concerns, and that's why working with a reputable agency is going to, get you started with the right fit, if you will. All right, let's take a look and see what else we have in terms of participations. All right. We have a Christy. Once I'm eligible to purchase health insurance in Brazil as a resident, are there recommended health insurance companies? That's an interesting question, Christy. And yes, there are. Now, they do change. Every now and then, right? So I would just tell you, to wait until you are about to go out there and purchase private health insurance and see the best ones at that point in time. Like in the past, there was Amil, A-M-I-L. Amil is no longer considered like a top insurance provider. We have Bradesco, which is run by a bank. Okay, it's a typically good one. And another nuance, Chrissy, is that it's gonna depend on the area in which you are. Okay, because whenever you get a health insurance plan, they are going to have like the preferred network, right? So if you are, let's say, in the countryside of Rio de Janeiro, you're not going to have that many options, right? Because if you are, I don't know, in Teresópolis, like more like countryside, Petrópolis, they are going to have probably one or two providers, right? So it's not even like you're going to have a large selection. And I remember, like, when we were selecting, health insurance for our own firm, we did face this kind of challenge, right? To try to find a plan that would help us cover, different cities in which we have our team members, and under a single brand, right? Like, so it was kind of challenging. So that's another factor for you to consider. All right, Chrissy, and once you become our client, we also have referrals for agents who specialize in the health insurance industry. Matt again is to expand on YY's question: can we purchase health insurance as a couple, married, or does each individual need to have their own policy? Matt, interesting question. So yes, you can buy as a family, right? And typically a family plan is going to be less expensive, right? Now, I don't know for two members of a family, for the two spouses, if it's going to be substantially better than two individual policies, right? Like, the typical upside is like when you have multiple family members, like 4 or 5, and they give you like a flat fee for the family. it does become substantially better. So I'm not very sure about like two spouses, but the agent would. The agent typically, Matt, will get you like a type of, not a spreadsheet, but they will get you a few options, right? So you can kind of understand like the pros and cons of each option, right? For the summaries I saw in the past, it's interesting because you would expect, all right, that there should be a clear winner, but it's not always the case. Sometimes you're gonna have like a specific plan with a really nice hospital, but maybe they don't have coverage outside of your area. So if you're gonna travel, maybe you're gonna have an issue with using the plan. Others, they're gonna have like a really competitive price, but they are not gonna get you access to nice providers. That's why the health insurance agent, they typically put a few things together and they share with you and say, listen, these are the options, these are the pros and cons, and then you kind of get what works best for your need. All right, so question here from our backlog. All right, so I am interested in the Portugal Golden Visa, and I heard about the 250,000 investment. Like, how is that different from the 500,000 euros? All right, so it's not actually a 250,000 euros investment. It's actually a donation. Okay, so in Portugal, nowadays, you have two different options for the Portugal Golden Visa. You're going to either invest 500,000 euros in a fund. Okay, you're going to pick a fund, you invest the 500,000 euros in that fund, and that's going to get you a shot at the Portuguese Golden Visa. The other route is like you don't invest, you actually donate the 250,000 euros. You could donate for, like to a cultural organization, to some type of religious institution, right? As long as you are donating the 250,000 euros, then yes, you also have access to the Portuguese Golden Visa. All right, just because we're talking about that, maybe a couple of follow-up questions and answers, right? Like usually you are able to include a spouse and minors in your Portugal Golden Visa application. And you don't need like multiple investments. So with a single investment of 500,000 euros, you could get, like the Golden Visa for the main applicant, right? That's an important distinction. And the others, they would piggyback on your application, okay? So just one amount and everybody would be covered. This is the upside, no need for 500 per person. The downside is that the other family members, they're going to piggyback. They're going to piggyback on you, meaning that if something happens to you, guess what? Their Golden Visa goes away, right? At least at the first years, potentially down the line, there could be like a spin-off in which the other family members would kind of retain their rights. But at the beginning, their rights are going to depend on yours. All right. So there was a very common, question and answer. Okay. Another common question which we don't always have an answer is about the changes. Like for those of you who are following on the like European immigration changes, there is a lot of pushback by countries because of the massive immigration, right? Like coming from Africa, from the Middle East. So the Western European countries, they are just overwhelmed, right? Particularly Portugal. So there is a huge pushback, and one of the outcomes is going to be the change in number of years that an immigrant should be in Portugal. in order to secure, either the permanent residency or the Portuguese citizenship, right? But as of today, we're talking about 5 years. So if you stay legally in Portugal for 5 years, you have access to both things. You could, pick a permanent residency, or you could pick the citizenship, right? There is a proposal from the right side of the political aisle in Portugal to increase this number to 10. There is a talk of a compromise in terms of 7 years, right? Not 5, not 10, maybe 7. There is nothing approved as of yet. There was a bill that was sent to the president. The president, run the bill by the Supreme Court in Portugal, and they said it was unconstitutional. Okay, so right now there is no decision whatsoever. And talking about Portugal, look at that. Marisa Navas, boa tarde, Dr. Luciano. Momento especial do dia. Thank you so much, Marisa. Thank you, Marisa, and Portugal for the support. Thank you for showing up. And we're just talking about Portugal. Look at that. Very interesting. All right. Let me see. All right. Chrissy, is there an income tax chart available to see what the income tax rates are for various income levels in Brazil? Chrissy, yes, there is, there are brackets, right? Just like in the United States, like we have different brackets. I cannot tell you exactly the brackets or, to give you very specific information. We typically don't handle those taxation issues or taxation advisor here at the firm. But I can give you a general idea that our highest tax bracket is going to be 27.5%. Okay, 27.5%. And, this tax bracket is going to be very easy to be reached by, for instance, foreign citizens just because of the currency reality, right? Like the 27.5 in Brazil is going to be for, a high performer in terms of income. But if you're coming from the United States, I don't know, if you're making $40,000 a year, you are a high performer by Brazilian standards, right? So very easy for you to get at that bracket. Now, there is also a approach, and this is like based on reciprocity between Brazil and the United States, meaning that if you're getting income from the United States, Brazil may want to tax you on that income, but Brazil is going to accept whatever you're paying in tax to Uncle Sam. Brazil is going to accept as a credit to your tax liability, meaning, listen, if you paid once, I'm not going to charge you again for, whatever you paid already. But let's say if you're paying, and this is from a very high level perspective, right, Chris? It's not like exactly how it works. It's more to give an idea. But let's say if your tax bracket in the United States is 17.5%, okay, and in Brazil would be 27.5. So if you paid 17.5 here in the United States, this amount is going to be credited in Brazil, and Brazil would potentially charge you only 10% because 17.5 you already paid, right? But again, this is from a very simplified point of view, and the distinction here is because Brazil and United States, they apply different rules to, for instance, exemptions, right? Like waivers, credits. So none of those things they match, like between the two countries, right? So there is a need, and that's why we typically don't like to handle, taxation stuff here. Like people who work with the taxation side of cross-country income and taxes, like they just work with that. It's very difficult for you to work with anything other than that, even because in Brazil, just like in the United States, right? In the United States, like, from last year to this year, there was like a number of changes in taxation. And in Brazil, it's even more common. Like for every single year, there is a new law addressing the specific taxation for the prior year, right? So, for the tax year of 2024, it was a set of rules. next year when we're filing for 2025, guess what? It's going to be something different. Of course, like maybe most of the rules, they're going to remain the same, but still, like there are substantial changes, and it's not easy to keep track of all of that, right? But I hope that was helpful, Chrissy. Khalid answer. Hello, Luciano. Hello, Khalid. I need to get information regarding PR and citizenship through marriage. Please explain. Right. So, Khalid, like from a high-level perspective, right? And I'm going to assume you're talking about Brazil, right? Because we're talking about Portugal and now Brazil, but I'm assuming you're talking about Brazil. So in Brazil, and I would say just like in any other country, marriage is going to give you access to a very high level immigration path, right? So in Brazil, you're typically going to get the permanent residency right off the bat. Okay, now, don't forget about the red tape and bureaucracy. Brazil is very big in terms of, registries, in terms of paperwork. So, usually people are not gonna realize how much red tape and bureaucracy they need to overcome until they are in the middle of the process. Okay, so just give you a heads up. But the upside is that again, if you have a marriage, fully legalized in Brazil, meaning that if you married abroad, this marriage is going to need to be recorded in Brazil through a series of steps. You're going to have a right to apply for the Brazilian permanent residency, right? Of course, you're going to need to present clean records, right? They're going to, verify your records. They run your name and everyone's names on databases, international databases, and so on. There is also traditionally a need for an apostilled birth certificate, so the Brazilian immigration know who your parents' names, and there are some other requirements, okay? But again, if you have a valid marriage, you can apply in Brazil. You cannot apply from abroad, all right? Like that's a very common misconception. People, marry a Brazilian, I don't know, like in France, and they say, well, I want to secure the permanent residence. I say, all right, so when are you going to come to apply? They say, well, we're not really planning. Like we just travel, stay a week, a couple of weeks. That's not how it works, all right? So for you to apply for permanent residency through marriage, you need to be residing in Brazil. And the Brazilian immigration is going to make a big deal out of the residency requirement, meaning that you're going to need to, sign, for instance, an affidavit under the penalty of perjury that you are living in a certain address. And in some cases, the Brazilian Federal Police, they even visit the address to make sure that you're living there, right? So that part is pretty non-negotiable, right? Like you cannot apply for convenience, right? That's not how permanent residency works in Brazil or elsewhere, right? Permanent residency, just like the name says, is for a residency, it's not for convenience. Regarding citizenship, once you marry, like after a year living in Brazil, again, physically in Brazil, right? Then you have a shot at applying for, the citizenship. Cases we have here at the office, they can easily take a year after the application for the citizenship to be granted. And you need to have a decent command of Portuguese language, all right? So hopefully if you're going to stay for a year in Brazil, you're going to be learning enough Portuguese to get you through the citizenship. All right, Khalid, I hope that was helpful. General Principal, welcome back, General Principal. Hi, Luciano. I just applied for my CPF with the Chicago Consulate. Your video was very helpful and answered the questions I had. Muito obrigado. You're welcome, General. Good to know. You will now have the Brazilian CPF, and that's a good thing, right? Like one less requirement for your journey in Brazil. Why? Thank you for all your answers. You're welcome, Chrissy. Glad to see you over here. and glad to see all of this participation. Moses, good day, sir. Nice to join you today. I have one question and two messages. Welcome, Moses. Let us know your messages so we can discuss. And in the meantime, let me take a look at this question. It's kind of repetitive. I'm gonna, read it anyhow. All right. I heard, the minimum requirement for the Brazil real estate investor visa may change. Do you know when that could happen? Any idea? All right. So, just as some background information, there is the so-called Brazil real estate investor visa. The typical amounts are 1 million reais for most of the country and 700,000 just for the northeast and the north of Brazil, right? Like those very specific areas. The idea here is that they are developing states, right, or underdeveloped states, and therefore Brazil wants to make it easier for people to secure the real estate investor visa in those areas, right? So if you target northeast and north, you just need to spend 700. Elsewhere is going to be 1 million reais. Now, regarding the change of amount, these amounts, they have been the same since 2018, right? So we did a calculation another day here at the firm, and I think we are arriving at a 90% we're arriving at a need of a 90% increase over the original price to just match how much this money was valued, like, back in 2018, meaning, like if you just factor in inflation alone, it shouldn't be 1 million reais, it should be 1.9 million reais, right? Like almost double, okay? Now, knowing the federal government, as I know, I would say, there may be a reason for why they haven't updated the amount so far, because they crave money real bad. And I think, there should be some type of study, like, behind the scenes saying, you know what, like, yes, the 1 million today is basically half of the 1 million from 2018. But guess what? There is so much more, much more in terms of the number of people applying that, they said, you know what, it was a good idea to have this amount reduced, right? So maybe the 1 million from 2018 now is not the same 1 million, but guess what? The end result is good. And therefore, it looks like they're keeping, because, again, I don't think they are overlooking. I mean, the federal government, they have, whole teams just trying to squeeze every single dime, from taxes, from fees, from whatever they can get their hands on, right? And so it looks more like a choice of not changing these amounts for now, just because of the sheer number of applicants buying real estate in Brazil for the sake of the real estate investor visa. All right. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. All right, Moses, as a foreigner, I want an investment visa. I purchased a property under construction worth 1.5 million with a 3-year payment term, but being that it requires a minimum investment of 1 million reais to apply for an investment visa, then after paying a part payment of 1 million reais in dollars through the mandatory government process, I decided to pay the remainder by any means, such as true. I'm going to fill out the blanks, Moses. Wise, right? Like something like this. Very difficult, Moses, to give you like an outcome, because then it kind of becomes like a consultation, which we cannot provide. First, in a public stage, and second, without charging you. That's based on the rules of the Brazilian Bar Association. But what I can tell you is that in like how we work at the firm is that typically we're gonna file, we can file an application after, yes, you have paid the 1 million reais, right? And we have clients who are gonna finance the balance, right? Like sometimes they are able to finance, which is rare in Brazil for foreign citizens to secure finance, right? Not as easy naturally, right? Like because you come with a different credit score, the bank cannot verify your income. There's so many challenges for the lender, but particularly in states such as Santa Catarina, builders that have developed a culture of extending loans to property buyers, typically not like a 20-year type of thing. It's more like a 20-month type of thing. Some of them, they are going to go as far as providing a 5-year finance, right? And then yes, for our clients, once they pay the 1 billion reais minimum requirement, we are able to go and file for their real estate application. All right, Moses, I hope that was helpful. Let's see who else. The Cold War channel, good to see you, Cold War. It has been a while. After R&M cards are printed, how long might it take to arrive at the Polícia Federal? If the status hasn't changed after 2 weeks, would it be worth just showing up? Cold War, it depends on the area, right? Like, I mean, there is this story of a couple of machines in the country printing the cards, and different states, they may have different timelines, right? But last time I spoke with our team about the cards, I think they were taking between a month and a half to 2 months, okay? So if you're just waiting for a couple of weeks, I would wait, right? Like, I mean, I wouldn't show up, Polícia Federal, they're typically, like at least from their perspective, right? They're typically understaffed, and they don't like people showing up, to check on things, okay? So I would wait. I would just track, typically you get like an application number, right? And through this application number, you can know when the card is available or not. Cold War. Now, before you get the card, you get the protocol, which is a printout with the information of the card. So it's almost like, the same thing as the card. However, unfortunately, banks, for instance, they don't like the protocol, right? Like banks, they say, well, I don't know if this piece of paper is legitimate or not. So until you show up with the card, like we don't want to open a bank account for you, right? So I get it, like you need the card for certain things. But remember that with the protocol, at least you can stay legally in Brazil without any headaches, right? Like you are a legal resident. You have this piece of paper. We don't have ICE, by the way, right? So nobody's going to catch you around, okay? So, yes, I would recommend the Cold War just to track through for the application number, and you're going to know when it's available. All right. Outside of São Paulo, Campinas, Viracopos, yes. I don't know. I would guess the same, all right, Cold War. I mean, they are busy stations, São Paulo, the Campinas area. They're busy areas. I would assume the same, right? So best case scenario, maybe a month, and worst case scenario, a couple months. All right, Cold War. I hope that was helpful. Let's take a look here. And by the way, just reminding you, like if you are enjoying our live stream, please like our content. This is going to help our business, and it's going to help other people just like you to find our content. I really appreciate the support. And going back to our backlog. All right. Yeah, I just spoke about that. Like, can I get a mortgage as a foreign citizen? Right. I am married to a Brazilian citizen. Would that make things easier? Yes, that's an interesting perspective. So traditionally, foreign citizens are unable to get a loan, at least at the beginning of their journeys in Brazil. Naturally, you don't have a credit score. Again, whatever income you have abroad, they are not verifiable by Brazilian banks. Okay, there are a couple of exceptions, right? So if you guys want to take note, one exception in terms of banking may be Santander. Okay, Santander Bank, like they have this very strong international orientation. Like I think they're from Spain, right? They're pretty big in Europe in general. They're also present in the UK. They're present in the United States, and they're pretty big in Brazil, right? And so Santander, they are trying to flexibilize. They're saying, listen, I am a private lender, right? Like, so don't tell me I don't know how to read income from abroad, right? So that's their take. They are kind of innovating in a sense that, they look at how much you are buying. They look at your profile, like are you a professional? I don't know, like you are an engineer, you are, a public employee in the United States, like they look at you. And as long as you're willing to pay a larger down payment, so let's say instead of a traditional 20%, which is typical in Brazil, maybe you're paying like 30 or 40%, guess what? The bank is going to, play along with your international income and whatever, credit score you have, all right? So Santander is a good path for you to pursue. Another distinction is like when you have a Brazilian spouse, you kind of can piggyback on your spouse, right? Like, because now the bank looks at it, all right, like one of these two people is more stable in a sense that they understand the credit score. This person is a Brazilian, right? And they kind of allow the foreign citizen to piggyback. And if the Brazilian spouse has a meaningful income, so this couple could potentially secure a loan, right? A mortgage. In Brazil, we also have a special type of mortgage granted by the federal government, all right? And it has different names over time. One of the names was Minha Casa, Minha Vida, translating my home, my life. And it was a program like for first-time buyers in which they would basically, just pretty much drop the requirements to, bottom level, right? Like, of course, like if you're filing for bankruptcy, they're not going to allow you to buy a property under this program. But even with, like a weak credit score and little income, right? Like typically people are going to be approved. But, of course, like the downside is that such programs, they are going to be restricted like to certain neighborhoods, right? Like, so if you're trying to buy, I don't know, like an average property or, like a higher end type of property, for sure, this program is not going to cover the type of money you're going to need. All right. But, all right, these are the answers. All right. Cold War Channel, the card went from sent to printing to printed, but after a few weeks, it still hasn't changed to ready for pickup. Viracopos is also bad for not putting up the appointments. Yes, Cold War, I hear you. Yeah, after a few weeks, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, right? They don't know people showing up. But if push comes to shove, then yes, I mean, I guess a visit there would make sense, particularly if it has been like a month. It has been a month since it is showing as printed, and they don't let you know, come here to pick up. I think it would be reasonable to show up under those circumstances, Cold War. Thank you for sharing. Jojo, for retirement residency, is it better to apply in Brazil or in the United States? Jojo, the main distinction, okay, not sure if you joined in the live just now, but we were discussing at the beginning of the live stream, so you may want to, after the live stream is over, you can go back and watch the recording because we were talking in details about those two different routes, okay? But the main distinction, Jojo, is basically the requirement for health insurance, right? If you apply in the United States, you must have health insurance with coverage in Brazil. If you apply in Brazil, there is no such requirement, right? So this is typically a big one. And if you have it, for most clients, whenever I have a consultation with a client, they say, listen, my health insurance is global. It certainly has coverage in Brazil. Then I typically recommend them to apply in the United States or, whatever countries they live in, because, typically the red tape is a little bit lower, right? That doesn't happen for all visas, but for the retirement, yes. It does happen, right? Like when you apply in the United States, for instance, you just need to present the apostille typically for the FBI background check, not even for the birth certificate. Even though when you arrive in Brazil, Polícia Federal may ask you for the apostilled birth certificate. And when you apply in Brazil, you need an apostille for pretty much every document that you're going to present, right? So more red tape. Now, because of buying health insurance for a retiree is typically in a few $1,000s, like you need to buy for a full year, it's not travel insurance, it is health insurance, okay? So, I saw quotes before in the thousands of dollars, right? And people say, listen, I don't mind, I'm gonna put up with the red tape. I don't wanna, throw away $2,000 just for some health insurance. That, by the way, is not even the real one we use in Brazil. Is health insurance, typically, right? I'm not sure about every single one, but the ones I saw, they are those that you need to pay out of pocket and then chase the health insurance to get a refund down the line. I don't like this arrangement, okay? Another distinction, Jojo, is that whenever you apply for the retirement visa at a consulate abroad, you will get a 2-year residency right off the bat. When you apply in Brazil, most of the time you're going to get a single year, right? So 1 year down the line, you need to renew. And that's for sure an inconvenience, right? So there you are. Now you know some pros and cons. And like every person is different, right? Like some people before even planning to retire in Brazil, they come for a visit. They enjoy so much that they want to start the process on the spot, right? So right there you have an answer, and it really depends on your journey, Jojo. But keep the participation going. You are welcome here. And good to see you. Matt Gaines. Adrian and I have decided to pursue the retirement visa route. Our target date to move is early 2027. When should we start the process with you? I'm sending my birth certificate for apostille today. 2027. I would guess, Matt, like if you're moving, like let's say January of 2027, we can comfortably handle the application in a 2 to 3 month timeline, right? So my recommendation would be for you to hire us around October of 2026, and there should be enough time, like to get you through, like all the paperwork. All right, Matt. So I can tell you guys are early planners. That's much better. Typically, you can, have a less stressful time when you plan ahead of time, right? Like, I mean, you're not gonna believe the types of prospects who knock on our door. Not surprisingly, we do decline, a lot of people, particularly when we see that they're not serious about their journeys. Some people, they say, well, I should have applied, now I am 20 days out of status, I'm here illegally in the country, and like what can you do for me, right? And then we think with us, listen, this person hasn't done their homework, right? Now they're going to hire us. Maybe they're going to proceed with the same kind of behavior, and then on top of everything, they're going to need someone to blame on their bad decisions, right? And we don't typically take those cases, right? Unless it is something very unique. Like we had a case like this But it was so unique, right? It was a young gentleman, and they scheduled a consultation. It was like this young gentleman and his two parents, and he was illegally in Brazil for over a year, right? And he was afraid because of immigration, so he wouldn't travel locally. He was afraid and this and that, and I could tell, like he wasn't like how can I say, he wasn't doing that on purpose. Like he said, I genuinely didn't know what to do. Like nobody told me, and he was very naive, right? And I said, we're gonna help this family, and we did help. But they were very honest. They were very upfront, and we took care of his son. Like he did pay the maximum fine, right? Like it was a fine for about 1,700 US dollars, like, or 1,800, like is the 10,000 reais limit on fines. He did pay the fine. Like we went with him like to Police Federal because he was afraid he would be apprehended, right? So we had an attorney going with him to Police Federal. He paid the fine, and then within the time window, because once you pay this fine, they give you like 60 days to leave the country. But during those 60 days, you are kind of, up to date or current with the Brazilian immigration, kind of, very typical reality for Brazil, right? Like they say, you are fine, but you gotta leave, okay? And then during those 60 days, we applied for the digital nomad, and we were able to secure the digital nomad. Now he is in his third renewal or his second, I don't recall exactly, but he's living very happily in Brazil. He's paying his taxes, and he has a girlfriend. The last consultation we had, he was considering, right, like if he should marry or not, right? Like, I said, listen, if it is an important relationship for you, like it's your decision to marry. I don't typically advise you to marry for immigration benefits, right? But naturally, I explained the upsides of marrying a Brazilian national, right? Like, the two main ones: you have access to permanent residency right off the bat. Second one, you have a shot at the Brazilian citizenship within a year, right, after securing the permanent residency. So pretty big deal, okay? And I don't know what happened, but, just sharing some, background information for you to consider your own journey. All right, Matt says, thank you for all your guidance. You're very welcome, Matt. Always happy to see you and Adrian here with us. All right. We are arriving at the end of today's live stream. We don't have a schedule for next week. Actually, for the next couple of weeks, right? For the next couple of weeks, I'm actually going to be in our office in Portugal. So I just need to take a look at the time zone, see if I'm going to record at the office. Yes, probably the next one on Wednesday is going to be at the office. And maybe I'm going to do an additional couple outside, right? Like in Portugal, I always think it's very fun and safe, right? Like if I take my MacBook Pro in Brazil, like, I'm afraid, like if it is in an open area, maybe I'm not going to have my MacBook with me for long. But no concerns like that in Portugal, right? And just like I usually share, we don't need to sugarcoat, and Brazil has enough upsides, right? So I don't mind sharing the downsides as well. I need to give you, like, the whole picture over here, right? But jokes aside, so I'm still gonna work on those dates. Once we have those dates, we're gonna schedule the next live streams, okay? And yes, so let's take a final participation here. That's going to be Jojo. After the renewal of residency under retirement, is it going to be permanent? And when I will be able to apply for Brazilian passport? Jojo, so the typical timeline for the retirement track is going to be 2 years of temporary residency. And then after those 2 years, you can apply for the permanent residency. Under the permanent residency, after you've been for 4 years in Brazil, that's when you have a shot at the citizenship, right? So more or less, 2 years, 4 years, a total of 6 years from the beginning of your journey to when you can apply for the citizenship. All right, I want to thank you, all of you, for the very interesting participations. Again, if you want to leave a like, don't forget to just click the like. You help our business, you help other people just like you find our content. And I hope to see you next week again.